Welcome to the 2025 AWP Conference and Book Fair here in Los Angeles, California. I'm Sean Bernard, a member of the AWP Board of Directors. Here's a visual description of myself. I'm a white male, never quite 6 feet tall, brown hair and glasses, wearing jeans, a shirt, and a dark blue fleece from the Nelson Atkins, last year's AWP. AWP is a small but mighty nonprofit organization that amplifies the voices of writers and the writing organizations that serve them, all while championing diversity and excellence in creative writing. While I'm a member of AWP's Board of Directors, first and foremost, I'm a member of AWP. Membership with AWP allows me to support other writers, especially those who are just starting out, through programs like the Writer-to-Writer Mentorship Program, the HBCU Fellowships, now in their 3rd year, and the newly launched Tribal College Fellowships. If you aren't already, I invite you to become a member today. We are delighted to bring you this event. I'd like to acknowledge and thank all our conference sponsors, especially the sponsor for this one, the National Book Foundation. Please join me in thanking them. And before we start, some brief housekeeping. Please silence your cell phones during the event. Please remember there's no flash photography. Respect seats marked as reserved for attendees with accessibility needs. After the event, please give the authors 10 minutes to get to the book signing table before approaching them to have your book signed. The signing is going to be basically where we are on the other side of the hall, so past the book fair, right? But just down this hallway, past the book fair. Okay. Thank you. And now it's my great pleasure and honor to welcome to the stage 2 tremendous writers, Emily St. John Mandel and Charles Yu, and Ruth Dickey, who will introduce this fantastic event. So.
Hello, everyone. Get out my papers, sorry. I clipped my pen to them, sorry. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Ruth Dickey. It's my tremendous pleasure to serve as the Executive Director of the National Book Foundation, and we are so grateful to be here with you all today. Thank you so much to Sean Bernard for that warm welcome, and to the team for live captioning today's event, and for all the folks who are working so hard behind the scenes to make the 2025 AWP conference possible. And thanks to all of you here in this room and the folks tuning in online. We're so grateful you're here with us. What a terrible year it has been already, and yet I'm so grateful to be gathered together with so many writers, readers, literary organizations, publications, and partners to talk about the power of storytelling and the possibilities of imagining dystopian and yet somehow hopeful futures together. At the National Book Foundation, we work year-round to bring National Book Award honored authors to readers across the country through book distributions and free events, Read with NBF, and our summer reading adventure, which will return this May. For those of you based in the Riverside area, I hope that you'll join us and our partners at UC Riverside for the event this Monday to celebrate our 2025 Science and Literature honoree, Claire Wamenholm, in conversation with the brilliant Danica Kelly about Claire's collection, Meltwater, and eco-poetics as a rallying cry. I'm sensing a theme. Learn more about our year-round events at nationalbook.org, and please do subscribe to our newsletter. We'll have a clipboard near the book signing following the event. Today, it's my absolute pleasure to be in conversation with 2 brilliant National Book Award honorees, Emily St. John Mandel and Charles Yu, on writing, adaptations, and the many hats they both wear. Emily and Charlie will both read from their work, and we'll also get the pleasure of seeing some clips from their adaptations, from their work reinvented for the screen. Immediately after the event, we will have the authors' books available for sale, with thanks to our partners at Skylight Books, and Emily and Charlie will join us for a signing following the program, so I hope you will all come and buy these beautiful books. And now I'm delighted to introduce our exceptional writers on stage. Emily St. John Mandel is 5 previous novels include The Glass Hotel, which has been translated into 25 languages, and Station 11, which was a finalist for the National Book Award, the PEN/Faulkner Award for Fiction, was the basis of a limited series on HBO Max, and has been translated into 37 languages. She lives in New York City and Los Angeles. Charles Yu is the author of 4 books, including Interior Chinatown, which won the 2020 National Book Award for Fiction. His writing has appeared in the New York Times, The Atlantic, Harper's Magazine, The New Yorker, and Wired, among other publications. He lives in Southern California with his wife, Michelle, and their 2 children. Please join me in welcoming them and thanking them. So we're going to start with readings before we play some clips. And Emily, would you start?
Absolutely, I'd love to. And as I pull out my reading selection on my phone, let me thank you all for coming today. It's really lovely to be here and in such fine company. The last time I did an event in LA was also with Charles, so nice to see you again.
Nice to see you as well. Yeah.
I'm going to read a very brief selection from Station 11. When I was out on tour for this book, I might have accidentally memorized this chapter. I don't have it anymore, but it's still my favorite part of the book to read. Okay, an incomplete list. No more diving into pools of chlorinated water, lit green from below. No more ball games played out under floodlights. No more porch lights with moths fluttering on summer nights. No more trains running under the surface of cities and the dazzling power of the electric third rail. No more cities. No more films, except rarely, except with a generator drowning out half the dialogue, and only then for the first little while until the fuel for the generators ran out, because automobile gas goes stale after 2 or 3 years. Aviation gas lasts longer, but it was difficult to come by. No more screens shining in the half-light as people raise their phones above the crowd to take photographs of concert stages. No more concert stages lit by candy-colored halogens. No more electronica, punk, electric guitars. No more pharmaceuticals. No more certainty of surviving a scratch on one's hand, a cut on a finger while chopping vegetables for dinner, a dog bite. No more flight. No more towns glimpsed from the sky through airplane windows, points of glimmering light. No more looking down from 30,000 feet and imagining the lives lit up by those lights at that moment. No more airplanes, no more requests to put your tray table in its upright and locked position. But no, this wasn't true. There were still airplanes here and there. They stood dormant on runways and in hangars. They collected snow on their wings. In the cold months, they were ideal for food storage. In summer, the ones near orchards were filled with trays of fruit that dehydrated in the heat. Teenagers snuck into them to have sex. Rust blossomed and streaked. No more countries, all borders unmanned. No more fire departments, no more police. No more road maintenance or garbage pickup. No more spacecraft rising up from Cape Canaveral, from the Baikonur Cosmodrome, from Vandenberg, Tanegashima, burning paths through the atmosphere into space. No more internet. No more social media. No more scrolling through litanies of dreams and nervous hopes and photographs of lunches, cries for help and expressions of contentment and relationship status updates with heart icons whole or broken, plans to meet up later, pleas, complaints, desires, pictures of babies dressed as bears or peppers for Halloween. No more reading and commenting on the lives of others, and in so doing, feeling slightly less alone in the room. No more avatars. Thank you.
That was beautiful. If When the World Ends, I want it narrated by Emily St. John Mandel. That sounds pretty good. I'm going to read a short selection that I don't usually read, so get to do the old man thing and pull out the reading glasses. All right. I don't even need them. I just do it for effect. Generic Asian kid. And then you arrive on the scene, baby Willis, a tiny little kung fu boy, And for a moment, the backstories and fragments and scenes filled with background players and non-speaking parts, it all makes a kind of sense, all of it leading to this: a family. They bring you home from the hospital, at which point everything speeds up. It's a montage of first moments, all of the major and minor milestones: first step, first word, first time sleeping through the night. There are a few years in a family when, if everything goes right, the parents aren't alone anymore. They've been raising their own companion, the kid who's going to make them less alone in the world, and for those years, they are less alone. It's a blur, dense, raucous, exhausting, feelings and thoughts all jumbled together into days and semesters, routines and first times rolling along, summer nights with all the windows open, lying on top of the covers, and darkening autumn mornings when no one wants to get out of bed, getting ready, getting better at things, wins and losses, and days when it doesn't go anyone's way at all. And then, just as chaos begins to take some kind of shape, present itself not as a random series of emergencies, things you could have done better, the calendar, the months and years, year after year, stacked up in a messy pile, starts to make sense. The sweetness of it all, right at that moment. The first times start turning into last times, as in last first day of school. Last time he crawls into bed with us. Last time you'll all sleep together like this, the three of you. There are a few years when you make almost all of your important memories, and then you spend the next few decades reliving them. Thanks.
Thank you both for those beautiful readings. And now with the magic of technology, we're going to see clips from those beautiful books adapted as they lived on the screen. Oh my gosh, I love seeing those. I'd love to start with the big question of just if you could tell us the story, each of you, of how the books went from page to screen.
Slowly and painfully. It was an amazing process through and through, but I had been working in TV for a few years as a writer on staff for other shows, and got the chance to develop this when Hulu approached me about it not long after the book was published. So actually, I think the deal for me to write the pilot closed sometime around the time of that supermarket scene, because as the world was shutting down in March of 2020, I found out I'm going to write a pilot, basically. So that was the beginning.
Roberto from Westworld says hi, by the way, speaking of staffing jobs.
Hi.
So, Station 11, the book was published in 2014, and then it was optioned almost immediately and turned into a movie script, which then just kind of floated around without selling, like for years and years. And the option just kept getting renewed and renewed, which was amazing. You know, it's just like a check every 18 months for absolutely zero effort on my part. But, you know, I was just kind of resigned to the idea, like, this is what usually happens when things are optioned. Usually it doesn't get made. And I was kind of at peace with that. At some point, though, to back up a little bit, a couple of years before Station 11 came out, so Station 11 was my fourth novel, and I'd written 3 before that were published by very small presses, which meant really scrappy, kind of underfunded book tours. So my events did not used to look like this. With my first 3 books, I'd come to, say, a bookstore in Kentucky, and 3 people would show up. Not necessarily at the same time, like one after the other, and I'd have to awkwardly engage each one in conversation. So that was the world I was operating in 2012 when my 3rd novel, The Lola Quartet, was published. And I had this tour set up, and I had an event in Chicago, and I knew nobody in Chicago. I was like, this is going to be a disaster. Nobody is going to come. So I thought, well, maybe I could partner up with a Chicago writer, because that can be an effective way to get more people at your events, by the way. If you can pair with somebody who lives in that city and actually knows people, then they might come. So I emailed the only Chicago writer I knew, Gina Frangelo, who was busy that night. But she was like, I have this friend, Patrick Somerville, who has a paperback out. I don't think he's done an event at that bookstore. Let me see if he's interested. So she connected me with Patrick, who, by the way, became the showrunner on Station 11. She connected me with Patrick, and he was like, yeah, that sounds fun. I'll do this event with you. He said, the only thing is I have to check the timing, because I'm doing a story about a gun show, way out in Chicagoland for GQ that morning. And I was like, okay. He said, actually, do you want to come to a gun show? I was like, sure. I'm from Canada. I don't know a lot about guns. I was like, this will be interesting. So Patrick picks me up at O'Hare at 7 a.m. and we drive way out to the furthest, I don't know, I think it was technically Chicagoland, but it was fields. It was out there, to this incredibly creepy event where it wasn't responsible gun owners. It was Nazi paraphernalia, World War II helmets from the wrong side, that kind of vibe. It was really creepy. There was a guy with, there were all these non-traditional weapons. There was a guy with an electric zapper. He was you hold it to their neck. There's no blood, so no DNA. I'm just oh my God, the fucking US, So so Patrick and I are both shaken by this. And we're just standing in the parking lot, reeling for a while. We go to the event. So it was this weird, memorable day. We go to the event, 4 people showed up, so I probably did double my crowd. And the thing that was important about that day and that made it fun was meeting this other writer, Patrick. And I remember having a conversation with him about how the economics were just not making sense. And this weird tension where, on the one hand, publishing a book feels like a privilege and a dream. You're just I'm holding this object in my hand, and it's incredible. It's the best feeling. On the other hand, it was a world of $32 biannual royalty checks. So financially, I wouldn't say that it was scanning, at the time. And Patrick was like, well, what are you gonna do? And I said, well, I do have an administrative day job. I'll keep doing that. I have this idea for a book about a traveling company of actors in a post-apocalyptic America. I think I might keep writing that. What are you gonna do? And Patrick said, I think I'm gonna try TV writing, thinking about going out to LA. So he went out to LA, started writing for TV. I went back to New York, finished Station 11. It was optioned to be a movie. That project went nowhere. And then after a few years, Patrick had established himself at Paramount TV. And I guess the book was kind of on his radar because I told him about it. And he read it and thought it would be a good TV series. So he brought it over to Paramount TV. I did have a call with him early on where he said, if you're interested, there could be a place for you in the writer's room, which I really appreciated. And at this point in my life, I do both TV writing and novels. At that point in my life, I was I don't know anything about TV. I'm gonna go write another novel, you go do your thing. So he went off and made this kind of spectacular series. I probably only saw it about 2 months before everybody else did. So probably the opposite path to Charlie in terms of involvement. And when you talked about it being slow and painful, I was remembering, so Charlie very generously interviewed me for the paperback release of Sea of Tranquility. And I remember you saying, I'm not sleeping anymore. It was that point in shooting Interior Chinatown. Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I skipped over those parts because
Right.
nobody here wants to hear about
No one
that
wants
part.
to know about the pain. But yeah, I could see how difficult it was. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that story though. I mean, it's the reality of 2 writers in a parking lot talking about what
You're just
gonna do.
I don't know. What are you going to do? Yeah.
Published, fiction, right? I mean, I remember reading Patrick's early work and thinking,
Yeah.
how exciting.
great.
Yeah,
It's
and
great.
then it stopped, and then I later on learned that he was this showrunner at Paramount TV, where
Right,
I have
right.
developed things. Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't know that I would have been as hands-off if I hadn't met Patrick as a novelist, where I just felt he won't mangle the work. He's a novelist, which in retrospect is really naive. Of course, a novelist could mangle the work, but I had some faith there, and it was justified.
We have one more clip from each of these shows that we wanted to roll, and then we have a million more questions. But let's take a look at just one more. So I'd love to hear from each of you. What was your favorite part about having this book that you loved and created come to life on the screen?
You know, the limitation of writing a novel is that it's just kind of one brain. You know, like you're alone in a room when you're trying to craft this story. With a TV writer's room, there's just more people and there's more ideas. So what I loved seeing were, I know this is a weird thing to say because I do believe in the book and stand behind it, but I think that you have to blow up work to work in a different medium. I think if you were to do a kind of one-to-one, page-to-screen adaptation, it would be insanely boring. So seeing the way the book was blown up to kind of be reassembled for television was really interesting to me, and I loved some of the choices. You know, just seeing the way that it deviated from the original work was fascinating. There was no plane crash in the book. That was, you know, they came up with that. But actually, I'm glad you played that clip because one thing that I actually really wish I'd thought of when I was writing the book was having Jeevan take Kirsten back to Frank's place. I think that was a smart choice. So, yeah, you know, just seeing what other people will do with your work, you know, as they're blowing it up and reassembling it and throwing new ideas at it. It was cool to see.
Yeah, I think my answer is largely the same. I part of the reason I chose that selection to read from is that it is so different, as you can see from the clips, that it's hard to, I mean, you can imagine a version of what I read filmed, you know, and I guess in some sort of time-lapse montage, probably under music, but it's such a different medium, and the challenge of creatively of figuring out how you're going to represent the things you do want to keep, but then the opportunity to completely come up with different things. I mean, the writer's room is, for me, still the most fun part of it. I think there's something really stimulating and creative about all of the aspects, about production, about post, but the initial conception phase and getting to be on the inside of a room of 6, 8, 10 writers, all of whom think very differently and who, you know, just have their own sort of creativity is just, it's just, I feel like after I'm finished with the writer's room, I'm like in training shape, you know, like I'm usually sharper for a few weeks and then it atrophies quickly when I'm by myself.
Can I ask, is it okay? As you know, I'm a huge fan of Interior Chinatown. Do you feel like there's a special challenge in adapting a book for TV when the book itself is also a commentary on TV? As I was fascinated by that process. And I have to be honest, I haven't watched the show yet because I love the book so much. I'm not quite ready to have it overwritten. But I was curious about what that was like as a fan of the book.
Well, thanks. Yes, I mean, for people that don't know, Emily was a blurber of the book, and like I remember when the blurb we got it, it was just it's such a huge vote of confidence, and so thank you for that. And it is a couple of challenges. I think one, a book about TV, and then you make a TV show out of it, and then the author of that same book being the creator and showrunner of the series. There were times where I needed more distance. I needed other people's brains, and I think there are also, you know, swings that we had to take that, you know, I don't, for people that have seen it, I don't want to spoil it, but it does diverge from the book quite a bit. I think out of necessity and out of choice, out of both. And so for better or worse, it's a very kind of different thing than the novel. So I found it really challenging. If in retrospect, I wouldn't trade the experience for anything, but if there were a world in which I'd had maybe a co-showrunner and someone who, you know, I had really talented writers, really talented people, but somebody who actually could have told me no to certain things, it might have been helpful.
I'm curious what the worst or hardest part was for each of you.
The worst?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the lack of sleep is not fun, I will say. Being away from, and this is mostly during filming. So we filmed in Los Angeles, mostly at the Fox lot and some in Chinatown. So I was close to home, but because I live a bit far away in Orange County, a lot of days it just didn't make sense. So it had to stay overnight here. And so for, 5-6 months, I was away from my wife and kids, and that's not easy on my wife or on them, and so that was just from a practical perspective. And I think from the other, from the actual making of it, it was the awkwardness of being an introverted fiction writer and then getting up in front of 150 people every day and saying, "This is what we're doing," spending all this money, other people's money on it. It's a lot of stress, and a lot of it ends up not being related to it's sort of like you get what is it, like, promoted out of a job that you're good at into one that you're not. It's like that's the reward for writing this thing, was to get a job that I'm not remotely qualified to do. So
Yeah, it's funny. It's like being good at writing novels doesn't imply that you want to be in meetings about like what color socks your characters are wearing. You're just like, right.
that's right.
I was not involved in a hands-on way with the making of the show. I was promised an invitation to set, but then COVID hit. And COVID-era sets were so hardcore. So Station 11 started filming in Chicago, but then moved to Canada when it restarted production after a year and a half. And at the time, the way it worked for Canada was actors were flown in. They'd have to quarantine in a hotel room for 2 weeks, and only then would they be allowed on set. So there just wasn't really a way to visit. I felt very distant from the whole thing. On the other hand, though, it was such a hard time in New York, just dealing with COVID in New York City. And there was something kind of comforting and amazing about realizing that, just like thinking to myself, somewhere out in the world, in Canada, there are hundreds of people involved in this very intense creative experience around this book I wrote. And that was lovely.
I don't want to give away any spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen these shows. But as you all mentioned, they do move in new directions from the books. And I'm curious if there was an element that got left out from the books that you were each sad about.
I can't think of one. If anything, a lot was added, because I think the book had much less plot, just being one of those like kind of literary situations, than the TV show did. And like with TV, you need so much plot. I'm not saying like a car or a plane has to blow up on every page, but like kind of. That's been my experience of TV writing anyway. So yeah, if anything, it was that a lot was added.
Yeah, for me, I guess, I was involved in the making of it, and the choices are mine. So I'm not so much sad as it was hard to realize, okay, we're going in this direction. So, for instance, a lot of the sort of parents' backstories, which is the emotional heart of the book, it's actually the first pages I had, and those, while we try to represent their lives and their stories to some degree, it couldn't be as central to the story as, because of the way it kind of grew organically into this story about Willis and going through his roles. So, I mean, I think the kind of introspective nature, as Emily's saying, that's sort of the thing that gives the novel its voice, is the fragile thing that's hard to kind of bring over in anything, no matter, even if you've got the writer herself doing it. I think it's tricky.
Yeah, that is something that I really loved in the book that I missed in the adaptation. One of the things that I loved about both of your books is the way they're asking us to question who gets to be a major character and who gets to be centered in the stories. And I'm curious how, thinking about adaptations, and I know you're both now working in writers' rooms also, if that process has changed how you think about minor characters, major characters.
I think I look more to the future with writers' rooms than I ever did with books, where I don't write from an outline with books. And so I'm kind of just winging it and just kind of trying to write a good book. And minor characters usually stay minor. Although Clark in Station 11 was originally a very minor character, and then I went back and made him a major character because I really liked him. Whereas I feel like with TV, I'll be thinking, well, this person's a really minor character, but maybe they're a major character in season 2. Like, what would that arc look like? So, yeah, there's just more of a, I'm just looking ahead toward a hypothetical future in TV in a way that I don't with novels.
Yeah. No, that is true. That's fun. And I think TV has evolved in a way that so much of this kind of multi-thread serial storytelling, like viewers are expecting a kind of density to the fabric, of the story. They want it, they reward it. So I think I'm always impressed and encouraged by, like, when I'm in rooms and people are giving real thought into how to take what is maybe 3 beats, 3 small scenes per episode, or even less, a character who might recur only in half the episodes, but you think of their story as something that should have a proper kind of shape to it, that you have to think about giving them life and intention. And so, and in practice, sometimes that doesn't always translate, or it can get cut, sometimes even because you're shaping, there's only so much story you can tell. But to start from that place as a writer is, it's an encouraging thing. And so, and then, yes, as Emily is talking about, you think about, well, this person might be useful later on, or other, sort of, they're people with inner lives, and they're also your playthings.
I have a related question, which I'd love to know how this experience will affect your work on any adaptations going forward or original writing for film and TV in the future.
You mean sort of the experience of, yeah. I mean, for me, this was like boot camp, and just sort of this very intensive, and kind of, I was put through the ringer. I learned a lot. So I think in one, just a very practical sense, it's made me understand better what works and what's not going to work when we get to shooting it. And so that's one thing, that when you're in a room, if you're lucky and you get to either go and visit set, or even maybe cover set and kind of be there for 2 or 3 weeks while your episode is shot, for me to have been there for the whole time, I just learned, and learned the hard way in a lot of ways, like what kinds of things tend to translate well and what kinds of things don't, and how to make decisions under pressure, and the color of someone's socks. I mean, you are actually the person who makes a lot of those decisions when you're the writer on set. And so that's, it's invaluable in some ways. In terms of like feeding back into prose writing, and fiction, I think it's had some effects, some of which I'm aware of, some of which I'm probably not as aware of, and I'm trying to be vigilant about that. I mean, I think there's a kind of, to me, healthy cross-fertilization, between like the 2 domains, but there's also a creeping, sometimes, I don't know, I'm also a little bit wary of, like, oh, do I sound like a Hollywood hack now, basically?
Does a car explode on every page? Yeah. I think the Station 11 experience just gave me a greater interest in being involved in my own adaptations. I don't at all regret not having been in that writer's room. It would have been cool, but I was writing The Glass Hotel and Sea of Tranquility. So I don't regret that time. But it did just give me a sense of the creative possibilities. And I've had the experience since then of being in a room where we were working on an adaptation of another one of my books. And it was fun being the person to blow up the story, like I was talking about earlier, and like figure out how that could translate. In terms of TV writing bleeding into fiction, I think if I were a different kind of writer, then it probably would. But I think I was already kind of a visual writer, in the sense that if I'm writing a scene, I'm also watching it in my head. I know what it looks like. So I feel like I write in a pretty visual way, but I already did, before this.
One thing that I wondered related to that is how it was for you to see a visual representation of the graphic novel, Station 11, that's such a central part of the book.
It was really beautiful. Yeah, I spent so much time imagining what that graphic novel would look like, and then it was amazing to see. I'd had kind of an earlier glimpse of that, though, which is so I have this genius editor in the UK, Sophie Jonathan at Picador, and for the first edition of Station 11 in the UK, there's a page where I feel like this isn't a spoiler because the book's been out for 11 years. There's a page, page 305. There's a passage where the prophets just died, and Kirsten picks up his copy of the Book of Revelations, and a tattered comic book page falls out. And in that page, in the UK first edition, my UK editor commissioned like a 2-page comic book page that was folded up and inserted into every single one of the books. So I'd already kind of seen it. I have it blown up and framed on walls in both New York and Los Angeles. And yeah, getting to see something that was fictional kind of made real, it's pretty extraordinary. It's the same feeling I get when I see people's tattoos. Like sometimes people will get survival as insufficient, which is a Station 11 tattoo. Seeing that in the world feels the same way. It's just like, oh my God, you invent something and then seeing it become real is kind of extraordinary.
Absolutely. Charlie, did you have a physical thing that was particularly moving to see on screen?
Well, no one's gotten a tattoo yet. Someone got a temporary tattoo, but I didn't know that at first, so I was like really worried for them. Yeah, I just felt bad. I was like, ooh. I think seeing the restaurant. I mean, and I got to take. They gave me a piece of a wooden sign that features in it, which is pretty cool. Although my wife was less happy about that because it's pretty big too. We're like, what are we gonna do with this thing? Like, I don't have a big office that I can put that in yet. But yeah, I think the place that you've imagined so many things that also in a lot of ways was. A psychological projection of an interior state. So that's a strange thing to be picking the color scheme for that, or to be, having it so tangible. But it did have this kind of warmth and lived-in quality that was really that was one of the most fulfilling aspects of it, was working with production designers, cinematographers, people that are thinking about color and about lighting and about thinginess in a way that's like, I could never imagine doing that. So,
I'm curious if you each have favorite adaptations outside of your own.
Well, I loved that show. Yes, and I love the book too. But I'm trying to think of what else.
This is like when people ask me what I've been reading lately, and I read constantly, but my mind goes blank. It's like, have I ever read a book? Like, I don't know. It's just, I know I've enjoyed adaptations in the recent past. Oh, you know what? I've been watching Say Nothing about the IRA. Oh my God, it's harrowing and it's so good. So that might be my current favorite.
Gosh, yeah, everything's falling out of my head right now. But I mean, I guess from book to screen, I thought Underground Railroad looked beautiful. I mean, to me, it's a very different experience. But yeah, I think that was something really special to have a filmmaker like Barry Jenkins make something like that. It was incredible.
Totally. Emily, something you said earlier is that you loved Interior Chinatown so much that you haven't watched the adaptation. And I'm sure all of us hold that sometimes when we love a book that we don't want to watch the adaptation. Does that come at all into play as you think about adaptations of your own work and of other work?
I mean, I guess I'd say I don't judge people who don't want to watch the adaptation. It's like, I get it. Right? I personally love the Station 11 adaptation. I'm a tiny bit biased. On the other hand, I did not work on it. So yeah, but it is very different. And I do get it, when people come to me and they're like, I don't want that version to overwrite the version in my head. I can understand.
Yeah, I think for me, having made, this, I wouldn't trade it for anything, but I sometimes visit the alternate universe where I never made it. And I think because now this will always exist and I can't unsee it. And for people who have told me, I love the book so much, and I watched the show, and they were quite different. And I don't know if they're judging me or, I think I'm trying to read between the lines is sort of like, it's not what I imagined. And I'm like, well, yes, of course it's not quite what I imagined either. And so I think that inevitable distance between the two is something you're just not going to get back. And that doesn't mean don't try. But it does make me think going forward, if I get the chance, again, to adapt my own work, or have someone else adapt it. I mean, there's a sense in which now that I've gotten this incredible once-in-a-lifetime thing that may think about it differently, may think, well, maybe I don't need to be the one to do it, or maybe it shouldn't necessarily be done if I don't feel like, and I also am, have the good fortune of working on things where I'm adapting other people's work, and the care, I mean, not to say I didn't try to take care with my own book, but there's a sense in which you can feel free to make radical changes or to, just diverge from it, and I don't know that I mean, I think sometimes you're told to take license, and if that's the case, or if the author feels comfortable with that, great. But yeah, I mean, I just trying to make sure I hold myself to that standard of respecting that there are going to be readers of this that are going to bring love and a lot of harsh internet judgment if you don't do it justice.
It's true. The passion of readers can be a mighty force. I know we have a room full of writers here, and I wonder what advice you would have for people as they think about adaptation and that journey that hopefully is ahead for everyone who's listening.
There was a piece of advice that I kind of found helpful in kind of letting Station 11 go, like letting Patrick Somerville go off and make it. I did a really strange writers' festival years ago at some college in, I think, South Carolina that I'd never heard of. There were it made no sense. There were 4 writers, and nothing financially made sense to me about it. But anyways, one of the writers there was Karen Joy Fowler, and she was asked about the adaptation of, I think it was Joy Luck Club. And to be clear, I regret that I haven't read the book and I haven't seen the movie, so I have no opinion here. But the tone in which the question was asked was I got the sense that the person hated the movie. They were like, so how did you feel about that adaptation of your book? And she said something profound. She said, well, the adaptation is the reason why I was able to buy a house in Santa Cruz. And I think that speaks to, and she went on, she was like, look, you sell those rights and they're gone. That was a sale that you made. And, move on with your life. Take the check and go live your life. So I think that is one very valid way of doing it. That, you know what? You can let somebody else go adapt your work and just kind of move on. It doesn't really have anything to do with you. You sold that. You can let it go. That was kind of the approach I took with Station 11. I just want to write novels. You guys go do your incomprehensible Hollywood thing, which I absolutely do not understand. Lately, I've taken the opposite approach, of being more involved and trying to push other adaptations forward. But I think maybe a path to happiness is just making that choice. You're all in or you're out. And don't try to sort of control it from a distance if you're not involved, if that makes sense.
Those are wise words. I think we probably have read about some of the same public and, semi-public disputes between when people are sort of halfway in or have the, I mean, it's rarefied air to have that kind of clout where you can have any say at all, unless you are the one who's adapting it. But I feel like I totally hear what you're saying, Emily. I think to me, I didn't have Patrick Somerville in a parking lot. I just had my own sort of creeping realization that, I was publishing books and I was, every time was a dream, and it felt like, well, this may never happen again. And there was also the reality of these are not bestsellers, and they're not going. I'm probably not going to suddenly turn into someone who can write a bestseller. And I think when TV writing came along as a possible path, which was, years in, I was working on Interior Chinatown when that happened, so I was on my 4th book, and no closer to sort of financial independence through writing, and so I was practicing law as my day job, and I think that there's no world in which I would have turned it down. And the same goes for the adaptation. It was really like a dream come true creatively, a dream come true sort of in a practical sense of like, being able to provide for my family and just have some security after sort of years of publishing. Yeah, I had a reading at Book Soup in LA. I'm from LA, and I had a reading where 2 people showed up. It's my 3rd book, and like, now granted, I didn't email any of my friends, so they're like, that's your fault.
Also, that's West Hollywood. That's like a different world.
That's true.
It's only vaguely the same city.
It's on Sunset. Parking is impossible. I love the store, but yeah, unless you live there. But I'm not that. All of which to say, I was pretty terrible at promoting my own work. And so I think to me that's the other part of adaptation, though. To your question, Ruth, I think is like the potential. The reality is that even a very little watched show on one of these platforms is going to probably be orders of magnitude more than will read a lot of people. I mean, Emily's books sell quite well, I think. But like for me, you could add a couple zeros to the number of people that I would get to reach through the story, and that there's something very tantalizing about that. Even though I'm going out into this world feeling like I don't quite know what I'm doing yet, but it's still, if someone hands you that opportunity or dangles that in front of you, it's pretty hard to turn down.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear you both talk a bit about how the creative process is different for you or similar when you're working on fiction versus working in a writer's room.
It feels kind of opposite to me. Like, so I've been in a few rooms at this point, and you spend at least a couple of weeks planning out what the story is going to be before anybody's actually writing scripts. Except like there's usually a pilot, and that's what sold it, and that's why there's a room. But before anyone writes the second script, you kind of know what's happening in episodes 7, 8, 9. Also the group aspect of it that I mentioned before, which for me is the best part. That's kind of invigorating. Just being in a room with other people who are as obsessed with narrative as I am, just like building a world by talking. Like, what an amazing thing. I really love doing that. Novels feel so opposite to me. Like, there is no plan, which there's not a right way or a wrong way to do this, by the way. I certainly know novelists who completely plan out the entire project before they sit down to start writing, and that, it's whatever works for you. But yeah, for me, I'm just kind of winging it and trying to figure it out. And that thing I alluded to earlier, where it is just me, it's just like one brain trying to solve the problem after problem after problem. Yeah, TV writing is so collaborative. It's something I really love about it, and that's the big difference for me.
Yeah, I think for me it comes down to logic. I'm not a very logical thinker, despite the fact that I, was a lawyer. I'm actually, even now, I'm several rooms into this TV journey, and I am usually the weakest link in terms of plot holes or things where someone's like, well, that doesn't track, or there seems to be quite a leap here from this to this, and that's where I really need the other members of the team to check me and to to improve it, because I think in terms of fiction, I tend to just work from this sort of emotional / intuitive / just language-based, kind of meandering path through whatever I'm trying to get to, and the thing doesn't have to stand up. It doesn't have to stand up to any kind of logical scrutiny. I mean, my editor and agent will say, at some level, you're going to lose people if the thing. But there's a much. It can be so much more elastic and so much more sort of just the reader's mind is the ultimate, cinematographer, right? It's the reader's mind is the ultimate. And so is the writers, I think. And so that is the biggest difference for me, is I don't feel like I have to obey as many rules. And so that can be, that's freeing, but also constraints can be, actually the panel before was talking about constraints, or in that room I was listening, and it's true, constraints can really stimulate creativity as well. So I thrive, or I get excited, I can be stimulated in both environments, but I mean, I think they are really opposite. Yeah, the constituent unit of what you're doing is so different from me. It's language-based versus image-based.
Well, I'm hearing that your book editors are more chill than mine. It's like I get notes, like every plot hole. It's like they are on it. But, anyways, I digress.
I'm curious how you balance when you're in writers' rooms. Do you work on your fiction at the same time, or does it have to be a break from the writers' room to have time for that?
I mean, hypothetically, you're doing both, but it's hard, is the real answer. I can't. It's like I love the writer's room, but also, the room I'm in usually breaks around 4 p.m. every day. At that point, I'm completely fried. It's like you've blown a story gasket in your brain and you absolutely cannot generate more story. Like I'm kind of brain dead afterwards. So I can do both as long as I get up early enough to do the fiction first and then go into the room. Is it similar for you?
Yeah, it's similar, and this is going to make everyone really angry, but our room, the one I was in, broke about 2:30 every day. tough day. But you are fried, and it's weird because you're fried at least in terms of story. That's more than I would probably ever sit, alone, like to be thinking and kind of passing the ball back and forth repeatedly. You're sort of. It's not that you couldn't do useful work. It's just that your fastball is sort of gone for the day, and that's kind of what you want. If you're trying to write, like, what's the point of sort of lobbying, sort of limp-armed, kind of, and so I feel like that's part of the reason why it can be a time of like a fallow period or a time of like idea generation, and like you stay over here for a while, and like I'll be back to look at you later, but not usually actively drafting things. No.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know you are in a room of people who love your work, both your work on the screen and your work on the page. Is there anything you'd be willing to share about what you're working on next? For either.
I'm working on a new novel. I got really intense editorial notes, so I'm rewriting the second half of a new novel. I hope it'll be out sometime late next year, but I'm not sure. It depends on how fast I can turn it around while also being in a room.
Well, you're putting me to shame. I wish I were working on a new novel. I have a document on my hard drive called New Novel.
I mean, that's a start, right?
Right, yeah.
A Google Doc, it's not.
Created summer 2020, I think I created that document. So I am, in theory, I am actually writing fiction. I worked on a short story last week, and so I'm very excited about that. And yeah, I'm working on TV development stuff. There was something that was actually announced, even though there's no green light, for Amazon, with Chloe Zhao and Plan B, and it's a science fiction series by Ian Banks called the Culture Series, and so we're working on an adaptation of the first book. So I'm currently trying to write the pilot for that, and in this phase, because it's not a writer's room, it's just me, I can work on fiction a bit because it's different, yeah.
I know we are all looking forward to all of those things to come, the short story and the novel. And I know we're almost to the end of our time, but I wanted to give space for in anything else that you wanted to share with our audience in terms of words of wisdom. Or I know we're also in a room full of readers, so if there are other books that you've been loving that you wanted a chance to shout out that people should check out.
I recently read Orbital by Samantha Harvey, which if you haven't read it yet, it's gorgeous. I've been recommending that one to everybody.
I've been reading a lot of David Graeber, the anarchist anthropologist. I imagine there's people in here that have read. He just has a collection out now. It's posthumous and excerpts various things. But the big book that I recommend from him is Debt, which is a history of debt in the world. And it is incredibly ambitious and thoughtful. And then another book is called The Handover, which is how states, corporations, and AI are all these sort of artificial persons that we have created in our midst and basically run the world that we're living in now. So really cheerful stuff, basically. Yeah.
Well, it has been such a gift to hear you both talk about your books, the adaptations, this process, what it is to be in a writer's room and how that feels, and to share words of wisdom with all of us. Please join me in thanking both Charlie and Emily for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
Oh, and please come to the book signing and join us.